Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Getting Hammered. I am your host, Mary Katharine Ham. I am here today with a special guest, my bestie and a Colorado political operative. Quite successful this year, actually. We're gonna talk about a lot of stuff. This is Kelly Maher. Welcome, Kelly.
Hello, Mary Katharine. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate you.
There's very much things on the menu today. We have the Madison Square Garden rally. We have Brene Brown podcast with Kamala. We have the Rogan podcast with Trump. We have non-endorsements by several newspapers and the freak out after that. We have some ballot initiatives that I'm going to try to sift through and tell you guys about a couple of them, including one that Kelly's working on. But I guess before we get to all that, like, how's life, Kelly? How's that last week before the election treating you with your kids and your appointments and your everything to do?
And it's so funny because I think you and I have similar personality types, which is one of the reasons that we are besties, right?
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I love about politics is that it takes everything about my procrastinator self and it like forces it by creating essentially like a false deadline every 2 years. And so it's like 2 a.m. the night before your like final paper is due in order to be able to graduate college. And that
Yeah,
is this week every 2 years. And that's how it
it
feels.
is.
Yeah.
That's what we're doing. I have to say, because I'm not working on a campaign, I have non-campaign privilege, which
Mhm.
means I can actually take a second with my family, which is sometimes good for your mental health right before an election. Although, by the way, because I lean right, I don't think my I don't think my mental health is as affected by elections
Right.
as some
Right.
of my friends on the left who really seem to be in like not a great place right now. But I do think it's helpful to get perspective. So I took the kids yesterday, the two big girls, on a long requested trip to Monticello
Yeah.
because we were sort of nearby. The weather was perfect. I was like, I think this is the day for it, right? So we took half the day to do that and, learn about the founding, contemplate some stuff, and there was a great moment where the tour guide was showing us, I believe it's a tulip poplar that's right in front of Monticello, and it was very famous. It was like, hundreds of years old. Thomas Jefferson himself planted it, but it had grown very, very tall over these hundreds of years, and it was threatening the actual structure of the house because if it fell over, or if it was vulnerable in any way, it was gonna be disaster for the actual structure.
Right.
So, sadly, they had to take it down, which is terrible because it's a old historic tree.
Right.
So you see the outside of the trunk sort of sticking up, and you see how large a tree it was. I mean, it was gigantic, like 8 to 10 feet in diameter, old trunk
Yeah.
ring, right?
Yeah.
And then in the middle of it is another tree that popped up after they took the original tree down, and it turns out that that tree is also a tulip poplar that is, like, the descendant
It's
of
the
the tree
baby.
they cut down. It just, like, sprouted up and created this new tree, like, 12 years ago. So there's a
Wow.
12-year-old poplar surrounded by the hundreds of year old poplar
Yeah.
trunk, and I thought, that was a nice image for right now when people might be thinking about the values of the country and its
Right.
ability to withstand things, and I just thought that that new growth was a really cool image right in
That
front of Thomas
is
Jefferson's house.
yeah, that is huge. That's really big. I mean, I'm a nerd, you're a nerd, right? Like that's things that we have just embraced over time. But I always talk to my boys about the big 3. And they're like, "The big 3." And you ask them and it's life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, right?
Right.
And I'm such a nerd that every time I hit a few cocktails with my girlfriends, I will talk about how amazing it is that we are endowed by our creator with certain unalienable rights, including life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I get very excited and energized about these things. And then
Yeah.
usually they just like shush me and hand me another cocktail. But it is so important to keep real perspective
Mhm.
in this time when things feel unmoored, right? Like,
Right.
it feels tense. People are angry, people are stressed out. Many people for their own mental health are just checking out.
Right.
And if you take a step back and you realize how revolutionarily beautiful this moment in time is, it's a lot easier than to put everything else in a healthier perspective.
Well, yeah, and, like, so I guess I'm almost literally touching grass. I was touching the tulip poplar, but we ran around the
Yeah.
grounds, the girls are old enough to have a discussion about Sally Hemings, so we did
Mm.
that because I want them to have a full understanding of the
Yeah.
contradictions of the country and the founding,
Yes.
and,
Yes.
so we talked about her. We talked about all the ways that life was so much harder, even on this property of one of the richest people in the nation at the
Yes.
time. Like,
Yes.
what would your life have looked like? And so that can give them perspective on all the things that they have at their disposal, such as like laundry. If I ask you to do
Right.
your laundry, it looks a little different than than it looked
Right.
at Monticello. So we had a really nice time. It was fun to watch them
Yeah,
enjoy.
what is that saying? "Do not envy the kings of old," right?
Yes,
We just
because those mutton chops came with food poisoning for sure. For sure. There's no very little refrigeration, guys. So anyway, that was our little moment for perspective to say like, okay, when the times feel off and people are angry that the country and particularly the ideas of this country are really good. They're good ideas,
Mhm.
even when the people are flawed. So anyway, that's what I did. I got a little heavy on our outing yesterday, but we enjoyed it. Okay, so shall we get into the news?
The news.
Let's first talk. By the time this comes out, we're going to be like past this news cycle, which I anticipated, but just so that we talk about it briefly. The Trump campaign did a rally at Madison Square Garden. There were
Yes.
a lot of people there, lines around the blocks and such in New York City.
Mhm.
A couple things from this. The coverage of it was the talk of insane people. It was just everyone saying it's a Nazi rally, and I'm like, there have been people on the Columbia campus literally calling for the extermination of Jews since last October 7th, and y'all now started to use the words Nazi rally for this group of, like, harmless Americans coming to support a candidate?
Right.
That's wild to me. So,
Yeah.
there's that part. 2, there was the roast comedian Tony Hinchcliffe, who's getting a lot of press for his mean jokes he told about Puerto Rico, about Latinos. I believe there was a joke about African Americans in there too. Like, offensive, right?
Mhm.
Okay. Let me say that this is an obvious own goal for a campaign because you don't want someone on stage who's pushing away parts of a coalition at the end of a campaign,
Right.
right?
Right.
Even if it's a joke.
Right.
2, he is a roast comedian, so you knew what you were getting. So, like, that's on y'all.
Yeah, as somebody who used to do advance, I would say that, like, I cost benefit analysis of having a roast comedian on the stage, I would have vetoed that, but to each their own, right?
Yeah, so, like, then you have to but again, I think it's mitigating that he's a roast comedian, like, we
Right.
understand what this person's job is.
Yeah.
It's not mitigating on the dumb move to have him, I don't think, because even if he's funny, it's not and I don't think these jokes were particularly funny, some others of his jokes are good. But I wanna play a little bit there was a sense that, again, Wile E. Coyote style, that this was gonna be the thing that brings everyone down. And look, it could move Puerto Rican voters on the margins, which is when the margins are little, you don't wanna
Right.
do that.
Yeah.
A lot going on. Like, I don't know if you guys know this, but there's literally a floating island of garbage in the middle of the ocean right now. Yeah. I think it's called Puerto Rico. Okay. All right. Okay. We're getting there. Again, normally I don't follow the national anthem, everybody.
I would understand a little bit if they were annoyed. That makes sense to me. But there was a feeling that, like, this was the silver bullet, like, this is the moment we've caught the roadrunner,
Yeah, but then
and
every moment is the silver bullet and no moment is. Like, if every moment is a silver bullet, all you have are silver bullets and none of them are working.
well, and that's the thing about Trump that I am sympathetic to his opposition because I've backed his opposition in several primaries now, that things that are high risk aren't as high risk for him because he's already taken all the risks, right?
Right.
So
Right.
you don't pay the same price. But I do want to play just a little bit from Jon Stewart, who has about my take on these jokes.
Extremely vile so-called jokes. She name-checked my comedy album from the 90s. Did I really? I don't know who's AI, me or that guy. Now, obviously, in retrospect, having a roast comedian come to a political rally a week before Election Day and roasting a key voting demographic, probably not the best decision by the campaign politically. But to be fair, the guy's really just doing what he does. I mean, here he is at the Tom Brady roast a few months ago.
The great Jeff Ross, ladies and gentlemen. Jeff is so Jewish, he only watches football for the coin toss. Gronk, you look like the Nazi that kept burning himself on the ovens. Kevin is so small that when his ancestors picked cotton, they called it deadlifting.
Yes, of course. Terrible, boo, yes. There's something wrong with me. I find that guy very funny. So, I'm sorry. I don't know what to tell you. I mean, bringing him to a rally and have him not do roast jokes, that'd be like bringing Beyonce to a rally and not have... Oh.
I had to play that if only for the roast of Kamala for having Beyonce not sing at her rally at the end, because that's twice now. Fool me twice, Kamala. What are we doing over there? Okay, so after the rallies, Beyonce rally, Madison Square Garden rally, I'm not sure whether either of them did them much good. They're both happening in states that are not in play.
Right.
Then we had the battle of the podcasts.
Yes.
So Trump was on Rogan, and Kamala was on Brene Brown.
Yes.
And Brene Brown is sort of like a how do we describe her?
She's like a very feelings self-helpy. She's like, I think, okay, this is
Okay,
I don't know.
just to give, this is actually a good thing. Her
Tony
thumbnail
Robbins
her
for
thumbnail
the-
of herself is
Yeah.
a researcher and storyteller who spent 2 decades studying courage, vulnerability, shame, and empathy.
Right. So Tony Robbins for 40-year-old ladies.
Okay, see, you nailed it. This is why you're here, Kelly. So, and like in the sort of opposite worlds of these campaigns, I think Brene Brown and Joe Rogan, those are 2 very different venues to be showing up in. Trump was on Rogan for 3 hours. I listened to about an hour of it, found it sort of surprisingly earnest, odd, very free-flowing, as Rogan often is, and as Trump often is as well. And they came out of the Rogan one playing the whale psychiatrist clip as if it was a big gotcha, yet another silver bullet. But what did you think of the whale psychiatrist clip? I felt like if that's your worst clip, you're doing okay.
For 3 hours, right? So I have a friend here who worked for a politician in Colorado who was also notoriously free-flowing. Actually, and now he's a senator. I'll just say his name is John Hickenlooper. He's senator, former governor, senator from Colorado, and he is terrified. I'm not a Democrat. He's a Democrat. So I never did meet
You don't have
him.
to worry about him, right?
Right. But I loved watching him because I would just wait for the silver bullets to like pop out.
Yeah.
Again, similarly, there were so many that there were so few,
Right.
ironically. But one of his staffers at one point described watching him go on long form media as like trying to watch a baby crawl across a freeway. And that is, if I was doing Trump comms, that is how I would feel about Donald Trump going on Joe Rogan, because it's like, you're just you're like watching the baby.
But I think at some point, Trump staffers don't have the same feelings as like they've been through the fire so many times. They don't have those reactions anymore. And I actually got several messages from 2 or 3, I think 3 suburban mom voters who have never voted for Trump before, who listened to him on this. Now I have a weird focus group because my friends are like politically engaged, right of center, not Trump fans, but like those suburban moms are the ones that Kamala should be reaching, right?
It's also, and those are the ones I think who ultimately will determine the outcome,
Yeah.
right?
So I get 3 outreach
Right,
texts this week from women like that
right.
who listened to Rogan and were like, "This is kind of fun."
I mean, it kind of like the woman who does my hair, like, it's just it they are the determiners.
Well, and they're reaching an audience of low propensity young male voters who are inclined to vote Trump with these appearances. By the way, I think they're tossing around that JD Vance is going to be on as well,
Mhm.
who he'll do great in that setting too. They both can tell stories. They both are talkers. But I thought it was interesting that the buzz was so big that several women I know had listened to Joe Rogan maybe for the first time, listened to Trump long form
Right.
for the first time in a while, because truly even I don't spend a lot of time listening to his long form stuff when he's at a rally or something, and came away thinking, "Oh, that was kinda interesting."
Yeah.
So that was that. Rogan, by the way, has said publicly in a tweet that they have not stopped talking to Kamala, and they didn't say, like, "Don't come on our program." They were having negotiations. She wanted him to fly to her. He didn't wanna do that because he likes to do it in his studio in
Mhm.
Austin, and he thinks the experience is better. She wanted to do 1 hour, he wanted to do 3 hours. So, there was just it seems like they were at an impasse, and there's all this outrage that, like, "How dare Joe Rogan demand that she come to him?" And it's like, "Well, I don't know, he's got 300,000,000 views on this YouTube of 3 hours with Trump, so
Yeah,
maybe
I
you
mean,
should
there
go to him. You
look,
have a
that
jet."
yeah, you have a jet, and also, this is the question, is this the universe of people that you wanna hit? And if so, that's literally what campaigning is
Yeah,
doing things in order to get the message out to the people that you want to get the message out to. So,
yeah.
if you determine that his 300,000,000 followers are people that you would like to get your message out to, like, this pearl clutchy hand wringing, "Oh, it must be on my terms," is basically saying to those 300,000,000 people, "You're not worth, as an audience, me making the effort
Right.
to reach out to you." And
Well,
that's
and
what the message is.
she was in Texas already. It's not like she had to go super far. Texas I know that Texas is very big. Don't get mad at me, Texans. But she has a jet, right? She could get there.
Also still the vice president and therefore the border czar, so, Texas has a lot of border. You'd think that
That's
maybe
true.
she would go down and check that out.
Check that out as well. Oh my
Ugh.
goodness. Okay, so
Any
that's the
any
Rogan part of
yeah,
this.
yeah.
Then there's the Brené Brown mirror image. So Kamala goes on Brené Brown's show. I don't really dislike Brené Brown.
No.
It's not my style of commentary. It's not what I'm
Right,
looking for all the time. It's a little too feelingsy for me probably. But
right.
I appreciate that she's a well-read person. She's a
Yeah.
person who's interested in research, that kind of thing. I appreciate that about her. Man, this was a hard listen, Kelly, for me. For me. There's I'm sure there are plenty of women that it hit, right? I
Oh,
think
no,
she has a
for
large audience of exactly the suburban, if we may call us wine moms. We're
I mean,
among them, so we're allowed to say that. But the
yeah,
suburban wine moms. But
we
ooh,
are
I didn't enjoy it.
yeah, one of the things that was fascinating to me is, like, of course, Trump does Rogan, and they come out with, like, "Here's 75 fact checks," because of course, right? And it struck me that almost everything that was said on the Brené Brown podcast was unfact checkable because it didn't have facts, right?
Yeah.
It's like, "What is your style of leadership?" I was
Yeah.
like, "Well, let's talk about whether this is a command and control leadership style or like a," and then, there was the part about like, "Well, I just want to have," I at one point said, "I'm just not gonna have any mean friends, and if you're shining, let me block the wind for you rather than blowing out your light." Like, none of that is fact checkable,
I'm
which is a
cringing while you're saying it.
because it's almost a direct quote, right?
I know, I
Like,
remember it. I remember cringing when I
no,
heard it the first time.
and you know what? I am right now at a point in my life where I kind of need some of that. I'm watching a lot of Facebook reels that are like,
Right.
"Get it, girl." I like everybody
We
has those.
all have a need for some of that. Yes.
I really struggle though because it was so much.
Well, and
It's
here's what struck me is that it felt to me in every interview, Kamala Harris is hoping that both the audience and the interviewer are going to help her communicate because
right.
she doesn't communicate well.
It's
So
such a good
she's
point.
right.
If
So
you should consider political
she's
analysis
always like Brett
depression.
Brett Baer. Don't you know what I mean? And Brett Baer's like, I don't know what you mean.
No, I don't.
Or she says to an
Yeah,
audience like, you guys get it. Like if you've raised kids, da 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 da, and nobody laughs and nobody acknowledges
right,
it because she's
right.
not connecting with them.
Or, like, did you see the
She
one the other day where she's like, "Now say your name," and the
oh
entire and I actually felt uncomfortable for her, if you're
yes.
like
Oh no, no, no. This is a pattern in getting hammered is that we feel physically uncomfortable for Kamala Harris all the time. I'm gonna play that clip in just one second, but let me about Brene Brown. Kamala Harris finally found the interviewer who will
mhm,
take every word salad she serves up and say, "Wow, that is so powerful. Yes. Yes,
good
Kamala Harris."
good point.
And I was like, "No, Kamala Harris. No. None of this is hitting." But as a result, she did perform better than usual because I think she had if we may use a Brene Brownism, Brene was really blocking the wind for her. She was
Yes!
really doing the work and
He was a wind blocking
yeah,
machine on
she was
that
a
one.
whole tarp. She was 'cause she's like, "Let me let that feeble light shine," right? So that was what was happening. Let's hear the feeble light, by the way, at this rally. This is one of the most remarkable illustrations of anti-instincts on a stage that I've ever heard. Let's play it.
Okay, now I want each of you to shout your own name. Do that. Because it's about all of us. It's about all of us. And listen, I have fought my whole career to put the people first.
God, I've never gotten a room that quiet if I wanted to in my whole life.
I mean, look, I've had some misses on stage where then you just, like, keep going, right? And look, you and I both do a not small number of speeches, of not and you think a line's gonna hit and it doesn't hit,
Yeah. You're
and
like,
that is part of it, and ooh, girl.
yeah, I
It
know.
is the worst it's the worst feeling, and so I have so much empathy for her, and additionally, I am deeply uncomfortable listening to that.
Also just I again, it's the opposite of political instincts. It is
Right,
anti-instincts
right, right,
for what you're doing, and it
right,
is remarkable. I looked it up to make sure it wasn't AI. I was like,
right.
is this wrong?" It's not. Okay. So that therein lies her problem, and you can't do 3 hours of Rogan when those are your instincts. You just can't.
That is a good point.
Which might be why several newspapers have decided that there's a new norm in town, Kelly,
Mm,
and the new norm is that they don't endorse candidates.
yeah,
The LA Times is not
yep,
endorsing a presidential candidate. The Washington Post is not endorsing a presidential candidate. I believe today USA Today has joined them
yeah,
in not endorsing a presidential candidate, and over 200 Gannett outlets are not endorsing. Now, those are small local papers. Gannett, I believe, is USA Today plus all these little papers. So
right, right.
that whole chain will not be endorsing. It says none of the USA Today network publications are endorsing presidential or national races. A spokesman for USA Today said in an email to The Hill on Monday. I
Well,
think this is
you read the Bezos piece, right?
yes. So what the Washington Post and the LA Times both had meltdowns inside the newsrooms. Not that it's weird to have a meltdown inside the newsroom because it happens like every 6 months over something. But they really lost it over this because their sense was these guys are rich owners of these papers
Right.
who are bending the knee to Trump in anticipation of a Trump presidency by sort of scratching his back by not endorsing Kamala. I don't know if I buy that. The LA Times owner says that that they did it because of Kamala's position on Gaza and that
Right.
she's too pro-Israel for them, so they couldn't endorse. Which made me laugh because it's like all these lefties who've canceled their subscription are probably like, "Wait, no, do I have to resubscribe now because that's the right signal? I don't know." In Amazon's case, Bezos put out this op-ed to sort of quell the uproar,
Right.
and he doesn't often write op-eds, but he tells them a bit of hard truth,
Yeah.
which is that Americans don't trust the media. And so he saw this as an attempt to claw back some credibility. He says presidential endorsements do nothing to tip the scales of an election. No undecided voters in Pennsylvania are going to say, I'm going with newspaper A's endorsement. None. What presidential endorsements actually do is create a perception of bias, a perception of non independence, ending them as a principled decision, and it's the right one. Eugene Meyer, the publisher of the Washington Post from 1933 to 1946, thought the same, and he was right. He also then says, like, I should have thought through the timing better, which I think is definitely correct. If you were going to do this, you should have said it a year ago. I think
Right.
that's part of the problem.
Yeah. Well, I think additionally, yes, I think that that was exactly correct. And distrust is at an all-time high. I think it's deeply concerning that the fourth estate is in the state it is. And you and I,
With trust levels below Congress.
yeah,
Yeah.
and you and I talk about this all the time that people are looking for and need a reliable narrator, right? That is kind of the term that we toss back and forth in our conversations.
Yeah.
And that seems to be lacking because people really are struggling with it. But additionally, though, it feels like this is the time where as people are starting to acknowledge that and starting to think about that,
Mhm.
that it's creating that vacuum where something can step in,
Well, and I
hopefully.
think he notes that he doesn't want the vacuum filled totally by other people. He says lack of credibility isn't unique to the Post. Our brethren newspapers have the same issue, and it's a
Yes.
problem not only for media, but also for the nation. Many people
Yes.
are turning to off the cuff podcasts, inaccurate social media posts, and other unverified news sources, which can quickly spread misinformation and deepen divisions.
Yeah.
Washington Post and the New York Times win prizes, but increasingly we talk only to a certain elite. More and more we talk to ourselves.
Good, which is fair. And the other thing is, I think that general knowledge of journalism amongst the population is less than it's ever been. I don't think if you walk down the street and you ask somebody if they understood the difference between the newsroom and the opinion
Oh, yeah.
section, like that. I mean, I was a 95. This is a total guess off the cuff. Percent would say like, what are you talking about?
Yes, I agree. I
If a
agree.
paper endorses, therefore news coverage is going, and frankly, the fact that there has been so much bleed from opinion into the news in this, like, I actually like a lot of Jon Stewart's takes, but I think that we can go back to, like, early Daily Show
Right,
as some of this kind of, like, bleed from opinion into news and this infotainment kind
right.
of and so that has created this kind of landscape where
Yeah.
now we
Well,
need a
and
reliable narrator.
as you say, traditionally there was this firewall between opinion and news. Obviously, on TV, for instance, that looks very different.
Right.
In talk radio, that looks very different.
Right.
There's a firewall still sometimes. Well, actually, there's not even a firewall between advertising and
Right.
and talk and radio because you're doing the ad endorsements. So there used to be firewalls between advertising, news writing, opinion that were very specific.
Right.
And it's interesting though, is like I think you're right. No one knows this anymore and no one's interested in it because it's so obviously untrue, right?
Right.
The news section is not operating so above reproach that anybody's interested in hearing this nonsense from news media. Also, interestingly, as soon as the opinion page does something they don't want it to do, the newsroom has a lot of thoughts about breaching that firewall.
Right.
As when Tom Cotton had an op-ed posted
Oh,
in the published in the New York Times.
yep.
And that was another meltdown. So it kind of it's a convenient firewall. The firewall is only there when y'all are doing the things we want you to do as
Yeah.
as journalists,
Well, exactly. And
which defeats the whole purpose.
general journalism literacy, I think, is probably also at an all-time low because the structure of what is and is not journalism has changed so much over the last 20 years. I mean, it's just exponentially insane.
Well, you'd think someone over at The Atlantic would know that you should have more than one unnamed source for a story, but turns out
No, no,
turns
we're
out we
not gonna
don't
do
do
that.
those rules anymore.
Yeah.
Anyway, okay, so I think they're right, largely, that on presidential elections, like, we all know who you guys are gonna pick. It doesn't make a lot of difference either way. It wouldn't have offended me or surprised me if either of them endorsed. I wouldn't have been bothered by this. I think the better way to build credibility is to do better reporting and
Yeah.
more fair reporting. And, if Trump wins, it's a great opportunity to prove that you can do so without losing your mind. We shall see what happens. On issues, however,
Right?
I do think maybe newspapers have some influence, and we have a case out in Colorado where Kelly's working on something. It is
Yeah.
an issues-based ballot initiative. We're gonna get into a few of those, but Kelly's gonna explain hers and the
Yeah.
big news she got out of the Denver Post this week.
Oh, I woke up this morning and was so excited. I called you on my way here. So I've been working on a campaign. There is a proposition that was put forth called Prop 127 here in Colorado. It is a proposition to ban large cat hunting, and I
Okay.
happen to be a hunter. I'm super passionate about hunting in general, and it is to ban the hunting of bobcats and mountain lions. They actually wrote links into it, but lynx are a federally protected species. Once again, showing their lack
They know a lot about this subject, huh?
literacy, yeah, lack of literacy on how the law works, but I digress. Anyway, so it is a lot of kind of the usual suspects, the predatory vegan types who have decided that they hate hunting. And I think it has a lot of unintended consequences. It has some language about trophy hunting. I think that has ramifications, frankly, for all hunting. And so they're using specifically cat hunting because people like their cats, and it's,
Right.
kind of it is the trying to take the ball and roll it down the hill, one of the first shoves, in my opinion.
Yeah. This is
Um,
the big cat lady vote.
yes, yes, and
Where
actually was endorsed by and is supported by Carol Baskin of, Tiger
of
King
Tiger
fame.
King fame.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, so I asked a friend of mine is running the campaign, and I was like, "Let me help with media on this. Like, please, I love hunting. I think predator hunting, in the North American, model of how we manage wildlife is incredibly important. It is and also, I'm somebody who has consumed predators, right? So there's this
Mhm.
idea like, "Oh, it's just trophy hunting," and people don't I absolutely eat bears, big cats, like, they are consumed, and also a lot of unintended consequences,
Yeah.
ramifications to address.
Especially since the people writing the law clearly don't know the law or understand hunting. So,
Right, right. Well, that's also a problem, right?
yeah.
So, but yeah, especially I really wanted to jump on this campaign for a whole bunch of reasons, and essentially, then we did an ed board meeting with the Denver Post. And look, we're being drastically outspent on the yes side, the people who
Right.
want to ban cat hunting. And they're on TV and they have all of these, very emotional pleas and all of this. And so I fully expected that it was likely we were going to be they would editorialize in favor of this. And so it was amazing, even though I took several biologists, former Colorado Parks and Wildlife biologists to the Denver Post Ed Board, and we talked for an hour and 15 minutes. It was really amazing, and they asked some really good, in-depth, interesting questions. The Ed Board was great. And then woke up this morning to the Denver Post editorializing against this Prop 127. So they're on the no
I
side.
love it.
I'm on the no side. It's very, very big news. So
A
their
r
kicker
a rare win for a right of center person in Colorado at this
yeah,
point.
exactly, a rare win, and their kicker was voters in the state have long embraced and prioritized outdoor recreation, even if it's a sport they don't personally participate in. Hunting big cats is no different, and we hope voters in cities and towns, on the plains and in the mountains will say no to Proposition 127. That's a big, big win for us because one of the things that's happened in Colorado is we've had so many people moving into the state, but they live largely in the Front Range, in the cities, in the towns, don't necessarily live on in the places where people's lives will be drastically
Change.
affected if we
But
can
they
go.
love to regulate that stuff.
Yes, yes,
Yes.
exactly. So they're like, "Oh, I would love to be able to go hiking someday and see a bobcat." Like, first off, you don't,
You
and
definitely don't. And you won't see it. It'll be behind you and it's gonna pounce on your head, so
exactly. Mountain lions can really hurt you, and Fluffy, your little puppy. But it was a big win. I am riding high today
I
because
love it. Well, and
this
it's on when
is
it comes
huge.
to things like ballot initiatives, there's so
Yeah,
much noise during election season. To
right.
break through with something like this is a pretty big deal. I also just love the liberty-minded message. It's a
Mhm.
very much mind your own business message coming from a major paper. It says,
Yeah,
while most Coloradans would not participate in a mountain lion hunt or feel comfortable killing a bobcat that had been caught in a live trap, we do not find these practices to be beyond the pale. Like all outdoor recreation, it has an impact on wildlife. But basically the regulatory agency's job is to
right.
carefully regulate and manage that balance between hunting and healthy ecosystems and between fishing in Colorado's rivers and streams and flourishing trout populations. So they're trusting that a balance can be struck here without banning things, and I love to see that.
Well, and the thing is, like, banning the hunting of cats then takes away a really important management tool from the regulatory agency, Colorado Parks and Wildlife, because then when you have those human cat interactions, then it falls to the government agency. They
Yeah.
don't have the tool of
Uh,
hunters or
yeah.
opening up more tags in that area. And cats, especially if they are not ever pursued,
Mhm.
really quickly lose their fear of humans,
Uh,
and that is not great.
yeah, if
Uh,
you if you know how much advantage your house cat can take of you, just multiply that times many.
right, right. Yeah.
So, because we were chatting about your ballot initiative,
Yeah.
I did decide to look through some ballot initiatives across the country just because it's good to brush up on these things before we get to election day. So I want to just name a couple of them real quick. I think on education, the most notable one, Kentucky Amendment 2 would
Mhm.
authorize the legislature to fund K-12 students outside of traditional public schools. It's a school choice amendment. It would allow the legislature to fund alternative schools like charter schools or provide tax credit scholarships, vouchers, or education savings accounts that families could use at schools they choose, including private schools. Now, that one I have seen getting a lot of press. It has broken through, but others, are much smaller. In Florida, they are thinking of making school board elections nonpartisan, or excuse me, of implementing partisan elections for district school boards in Florida. That is an amendment. What else do we got? Oh, this one's fun. California,
Oh,
always home to great ideas.
here we go.
California Proposition 33 would prohibit state limitations on local rent control. So it would allow municipalities to do all sorts of rent control. The opponent's argument is obviously, hey guys, rent control does not increase housing. In fact, it's really bad when we already have a shortage. So we will
I
see
would
what
really like to take
happens.
every policymaker in the state of California, and I would work the rest of my life to pay to put them through just some Econ 101. Just
Just
like
basic econ.
right?
We have abortion amendments or some constitutional amendments, some initiatives on the ballot in Colorado, in
Yep.
Florida, in Maryland, Nevada, New York, South Dakota. Obviously the places where this is potentially important for national races. Maryland has a Senate race, so that's Larry Hogan's running, but it's unlikely he would win. It's certainly a lean blue state. This will probably help the Democrats. Nevada is a swing state, so there's
Mhm.
an initiative there. And I'm sure you've been following the Colorado one, but I'll read briefly what it is. Colorado Amendment 79, the Right to Abortion and Health Insurance Coverage Initiative, would add a Section 32 to the state's constitution, basically recognizing a right to
Right.
abortion. Currently, there are no legal restrictions on abortion at any time during pregnancy in Colorado, but
We
this
have some of, like, the latest term abortions in the country, like, really, really, really late term.
a dubious stat for you guys. And a 1984 ballot initiative banned the use of state funds for abortion, except in cases where mother's health is in danger. And this would probably undercut that restriction. So it'd be like the last standing restriction gone in Colorado, I guess.
Yeah, it's I mean, and actually that's a we have, I think, I think I counted because I did a speech where I ran through them. My liberal counterpart had to cancel, so I played both sides, right?
Mhm.
So I did me versus me, making my best argument on all the ballot issues here in
Mhm.
Colorado for a speech. It was actually, I think, fairly funny.
You're such an honest debater, look at you.
Well, no, I mean, so they called it speed dating for the ballot. And so I made a bunch of jokes about how conservatives are better because we like fish pictures and speed dating, right? And
Yeah, fish pictures much maligned in the menfolk, but we don't mind them.
no, no,
Yeah,
if you have a fish picture, like that's a bonus on our side of the aisle. But yeah, so I made a bunch of jokes, but I then played both sides. And I think it's so important to be able to do that if you are somebody who wants to advocate for literally anything politically,
right.
is you have to be able to play both sides of each issue. And it was a super fun speech, but I think we had like 15 that I had to do, 15 ballot
Oof,
issues.
girl. Yeah,
And you have
some states have a lot of them.
yeah, so it's really easy in the state of Colorado to put ballot issues on to get them on the ballot. We have a higher standard for constitutional changes than for statutory changes, but it's still just a relatively cheap, relatively easy way to do a bunch of message testing, and people do it here on all kinds of things. I mean,
Right.
we've got abortion, we've got gay marriage, we've got ranked choice voting, we've got cat hunting, we've got, veterinary regulation, like you name it, there are things on the ballot for it here in Colorado. And that makes, for instance, this 127 endorsement by the Denver Post on the no position
Right.
so much more important because there's so little oxygen to have, particularly in a presidential year. It is
Yes.
it's hard to get eyeballs on stuff.
Well, and so one of the things that people use ballot initiatives for as well, obviously these abortion related ones can increase turnout on both
Mhm.
sides, but particularly on the left among women voters, and they can also sort of end around law in the state. So Florida Amendment 4, the Right to Abortion Initiative, would add to the state's constitution that no law shall prohibit, penalize, delay, or restrict abortion before viability or when necessary to protect the patient's health as determined by the patient's health care provider. It's basically an attempt to go around the 6-week mark in that was instituted in 2024 in
Mhm.
Florida. A 60% supermajority is required for this amendment to pass, and opponents basically say this could throw the doors open to many shenanigans and take off the table many restrictions that were in good faith put in place by voters and legislators. So that's one of them. Let's see what else we got. Nevada's doing a constitutional protections set forth in the proposed amendment are similar to current Nevada law, under which abortion is legal until the 24th week of pregnancy. So that's an enshrinement in the Constitution. South Dakota is doing something similar, although it has different trimester levels in South Dakota. So these things will matter for getting voters out. They may
Right.
matter for changing the landscape in those states. So I just wanted you guys to have a heads up about some of them. A big thank you, by the way, to Reason Foundation at reason.org for that information on ballot initiatives and doing all that research, which I used heavily when I was explaining.
And, when we're talking about voter turnout, right? This is your every campaign is you want to turn out your block of voters. And as we're talking about who each presidential or in a lot of these Senate campaigns, like who their blocks of voters are, you can probably be able to anticipate who the voter is that is going to be able to vote for you. We spend a bunch of time on research and data trying to identify who those voters are. I'll be fascinated though who these kind of like shy, quiet ticket splitters are, right?
Mhm.
Like I know of a somebody I know who is in Maricopa County, right?
Well, that's
And
an important county in Arizona, y'all, for
it is
anybody who
an
hasn't is
important
not deep
county,
in the lore. Yeah.
important county in Arizona, and they have a Harris yard sign in their yard, and they voted for Trump. So, you just
Mm.
never know how
Well,
this is
so
gonna
I'm
go.
I'm glad you brought that up, Kelly, because I think maybe an underlooked at phenomenon could
Mm,
be the shy woman Trump voter.
mhm.
Okay. So the take from the left
Mhm.
is that women are having to actively hide their Harris votes from their husbands. I'm not familiar with this phenomenon, although I do not discount that there are abusive relationships in which you wouldn't be able to communicate such things and that you would keep it a secret. So, like, that's like on the margins, I think that that could be a real thing.
Right.
The messaging is so crazy to me. So here's a Harris Walls ad. Now, I believe it's from an outside group. It's not from the actual campaign, but it name checks Harris Walls. It is two couples walking into a voting area
Mm.
to cast their votes, and they're very Republican looking. Like, the stereotypes are fantastic. The ladies have striped boat neck shirts and, like, rhinestone ball caps on with American flags. It's
Yeah,
fantastic.
yeah, yeah.
All right, let me see if I
We
can
are
play
we
this
are
for you.
nothing if not caricatures of
Yeah,
ourselves.
here we go.
Your turn, honey.
In the one place in America where women still have a right to choose.
Her husband walked up to her as she was walking into the booth and said, "Your turn, honey." And here she goes with her rhinestone cap.
You can vote any way you want. And no one will ever know.
She and her friend look across meaningfully at each other with their boat neck shirts and their rhinestone hats, and they mark Kamala Harris for president.
Did you make the right choice?
Sure did, honey.
Remember, what happens in the booth stays in the booth.
So
I
I don't think that that's a giant segment of voters.
I don't I think that is
I think it's more
deeply
likely.
offensive.
I think it's more likely, and again, my group of friends is probably odd, so I
Yeah.
don't want to extrapolate too much. I think it's more likely you're a woman
Mhm.
who's voting Trump and hiding it from your woman friends.
That's exactly what I was gonna say is that me as a political practitioner, I would make the response ad to this a bunch of women sitting around with, like, pink prosecco and, charcuterie and, sitting there and being like, "Oh, yeah, I voted for," and just,
Mhm.
like, smiling, being like, "Mhm, mhm. None of your friends will ever know."
You don't
Was
have to tell them.
It's just ugh,
I mean,
yikes.
I do think there's, like, if you get so hung up on the idea that the other side is so deeply oppressive of
Right,
women,
right,
you assume that this is how you should talk to women.
right.
And I don't think it's a great idea. It doesn't work for me. It's never worked for me to be told that I'm racist or sexist if I don't vote for somebody. Now, I know I'm a little weird, right? I have an independent streak that that doesn't allow for that kind of bullying. It just seems not wise.
Well, and I think we've kind of this is like end stage social shame politics, right? Where this is no longer an agree to disagree type of situation or a I this has become and I think we started to see this really around Obama, maybe a little bit before that, but I never before felt that my politics prevented me from being friends with anybody.
Right.
And it I hope we can get back to the days where we can all, have respect for each other.
Yeah.
And it's really hard when both sides, I think, rely unnecessarily on ad hominems.
Yeah. I do want to know why those nice ladies are married to Nazis.
It's a great question.
What happened there? Susan? What happened? No,
Mm,
I just don't think it's very effective, and maybe I'm wrong. Obviously, they're gonna have more women voters than Trump will, but I think this idea that there's this super substantial, quiet vote for Harris, I don't think there's a social cost really for saying that you're a Harris voter. And again, more likely in your female circles, there's a social cost for saying you're a Trump voter. So we shall see what happens. Also, did you see that Walls and AOC played Madden the other night
yes.
on Twitch? Can I say I'm not working on a campaign, but I thought this was a cute idea. Like, to play Madden on Twitch, you're reaching people, you're having trouble with male voters.
Right.
Dudes watch Twitch Madden players. But the thing is, dudes watch good Madden players on Twitch.
Yeah.
So AOC and Tim Walz played one half of a football game. The score was 0-0.
Oh, no.
And
Practice if you're gonna do it.
yeah, AOC, credit where it's due, always looks stunning and hits the tone for something like a streaming live
Mhm.
Twitch Madden game exactly right. She gets that space. So I
Right.
understand why you have her there. I would think maybe, I don't know, is there someone else more manly you could play football with to get male voters? But whatever. She sounds good.
Mhm.
Then the tweets come out after the fact. And so Tim Walz tweets, AOC can run a mean pick six and I can call an audible on a play. And we both know that if you take the time to draw up a playbook, you're gonna use it. A pick six is not a play that people run. And man, did he get dunked on. It's
Okay. This this is why
like
you
if teams
put
knew they could just run a pick six.
right. This is why you pick comms people who know what the thing is that you're talking about, right?
Mhm.
Like, I'm just having throwbacks to so many different where you just put people in situations that are so incongruous that they just cannot exist, right?
No, no, this was a miss. This was a miss,
Well,
and I just enjoyed that very much. So that's how the mail outreach is going on. Again, as someone, Kelly, who, despite your recent victories, has been existing in Colorado right-leaning politics for the
yep,
last 10 years, I'm
yep,
sure you would warn everybody not to count their chickens before they hatch. You
true.
know, you can try to run the pick six all you want, but we gotta make it to the end of the game, Kelly.
Yeah, yeah, that if you're using that playbook and it's full of stuff that doesn't work, it won't help you. Like,
Yeah.
you can have the thickest playbook in the league, and
No.
you won't be able to run that into the end zone for the like,
At least they got the number of
I'll
points right.
Tim Walls it. You won't be able to run that into the end zone for the field goal audible,
I
right?
mean,
Or
we have to give
shoot.
them credit for getting the number of points right. Like, he could have said pick 5, that would have been bad. That would have been worse.
I'll just football word salad it.
I continue to think that looking at
Mhm.
the data seems to indicate over the past several weeks that although it is a small shift,
Yep.
the trend of numbers seems to be moving in the direction of the right, not in the direction of the left. Now, that does not mean it is insurmountable, right?
Right, right.
But it does mean that, like, if you're looking for data points to hang your hat on, the right is happier than the left is at this point. And I would just point out in particular Nevada,
Yep.
where John Ralston, who's a real expert out there, has been interpreting early vote and keeping an eye on it. Right now, Republicans have an uncharacteristic 40,000 vote lead in early voting. He
Yeah,
has asked if there is mail in voting backlog that's not in the system, and there is not. That's where a lot of Clark County
yeah,
Democrat votes would come from. He says this looks like an issue for him, for Nevada Democrats, unless things really pick up. Just for context, the entire raw vote difference when Biden won Nevada in 2020 was 34,000 votes.
yeah,
So,
well, and look, it's best to peak late, right? We've been
right.
saying that forever. It's best to have the momentum late. Colorado's a little different because we have election season, because we have all mail, and it's just a massive amount of early votes. But if you have to pick between peaking early and peaking late, it's always better to peak late and go into election day with the momentum on your side. And so much of this is about kind of energy and excitement and movement, and we shall
It's an
see.
it's interesting to me too. Someone said the other day, because I do read behavior from campaigns as a data point that you can put in the juicer with everything else and figure out what's going on, right? And the campaigns behavior on the Harris side looks pretty desperate, and this Hitler stuff seems very neurotic and I don't think very effective. However, someone pointed out that, again, in 2012, Obama was looking sort of peevish towards the last 3 weeks of the election, and he ended up winning comfortably. It might be that Democrats are just kind of neurotic and that their neuroses is what drives them to vote. And so their neuroses are being used to get them out there to vote. But
Right.
also, Biden didn't look like this in 2020, although 2020 is just a weird year to extrapolate anything from because it was so weird.
Well, 16, I don't know. 16, this is the problem with weird cycle after weird cycle, right?
Yeah.
Is then it's really, really hard to get any kind of trend when it just feels so kind of all over the map, which is why I just say I don't tea leaf anymore. Like that's not my and one of the problems.
I got burned in 2022 pretty bad,
Yeah,
so,
but exactly. I mean, and this is one of the problems in politics is that there is almost no cost to tea leaf reading and being wrong. And if you are a tea leaf reader and you somehow get it right, or you just like black swan it, right? And you just pick a random thing and then it happens, then you look like a genius,
right,
but the day after the election, if you got it wrong, nobody remembers.
right. By the way, just eyes on black swan events right now would be if you wanted to make some bets and have weird odds, you would go with a Trump upset in New Mexico or New Hampshire. Those are
Mhm.
the weird ones.
Yeah. I mean, I could see New Mexico, honestly.
Well, and this is given a lot of gains with Latino voters and
Mhm.
whether that plays there. It's a state with a small population. You can reach a
Girl,
lot of
there's
people
a there's
probably
a
with not that much money.
there is a county in, Colorado, Pueblo County, which demographically is very close to New Mexico, and Trump won
Hmm.
in 20, Pueblo, and everybody was pretty shocked because it has been notoriously a blue county, and so I've been paying attention to that. That's really
Okay.
fascinating.
See, I
And it
love that.
was
Go
Oh,
ahead.
sorry. No, I was gonna say, and it was in Lauren Boebert's old seat that
Mhm.
she then switched, across the state, but Pueblo County was in Lauren Boebert's old seat, and so the really fascinating interplay between Trump, Boebert, it's a
It's
really interesting place to watch, and I get a lot of New Mexico kind of.
New Mexico adjacent information.
Yeah, yeah, well, I mean, it's Southern Colorado, which is
Yeah.
close to New Mexico, so.
Yeah. Okay, that's good to know. And
Yeah.
on that note, I love that we have said, be careful about 2020 trends and tea leaf reading. And also, here's our 2020 to 24 trend in our tea leaf reading, because
No,
that's what we do, y'all. We enjoy talking about this stuff, even though we tell ourselves that we hate politics so frequently. A
chit chat.
lot of our friendship is based on this kind of chit chat. And we do enjoy it. And I congratulate you on your preliminary big victory on just getting a breakthrough story on your proposition position in Colorado.
Dude, 127, vote no. Denver Post, that was yeah, I think I called you probably screaming in a way that was audible mostly to dogs because I was so excited this morning.
It's all good. You were on speaker in the car, so the whole neighborhood heard it. Congratulations to you. Alrighty. With that, we will close it out. Vic will be back later this week. Do not worry about him. We're just giving him, the man has to rest sometimes. We just want to give him his space. That brain is doing a lot of work. He has to drink a lot of wine and eat a lot of steak. And we just want to sometimes give him a moment. So we're doing that. Kelly Maher stepped in to help us. Tell us where we could follow you, Kelly, on Twitter, etc.
I am at OK Maher on Twitter, OKMAHER. And the website for my organization is restoringstandards.com.
Oh, can you do a quick restoring standards explanation for us real quick? Because I should have talked to you about that. So go.
Oh, well, I mean, yeah, really fast. Some friends I started an organization with some friends, both on the left and the right. This is a nonpartisan organization to get crazy people out of politics. That's the tweet, right? It's like crazy people are ruining politics. We should stop allowing crazy people to ruin politics. So we
Oh.
need to help them to the door.
Yeah, taking those reins back. Okay, I like it. So it's restoringstandards.com. Okay, check it out, everybody, and check out
Yeah.
OK Maher. Thanks for being with us. Thanks for getting hammered responsibly. This has been a Nebulous Media podcast.